Between a star basketball commit showing out on a big stage on Monday evening and previewing the first round of the ACC men's basketball tournament, there's a lot of stuff to talk about on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. Today's episode of Locked On Louisville is brought to you by RunYourPool. March Madness is here, and RunYourPool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. As always, I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We have a pretty exciting show today. We will talk about Kaleb Glenn's huge performance against the Ballard Bruins in the 7th Region Championship on Monday evening. A big win for the male Bulldogs in triple overtime in an instant classic. We will transition into previewing the previewing the matchup with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the first round of the ACC Tournament that will be played tonight. And then finally, we will answer the question, is Louisville women's basketball still in line for a 1 seed? What needs to happen to ensure that happens? We will answer that here in just a second, but I want to start out talking about the male Bulldogs, talking about Louisville basketball commit Kaleb Glenn, and I'll just be completely honest. I think that game between Male and Ballard that went to triple overtime, in which Kaleb Glenn won on pretty much a buzzer beater, mid-range jump shots right near the free throw line. That game was one of the best high school games that I have ever been witness to. There have been a couple throughout the city of Louisville that I've witnessed over the years. Trinity and Ballard back in 2014, where former Louisville players Quentin Snyder and Ray Spalding went toe-to-toe in the regional final. The King of the Bluegrass final between Fern Creek and Trinity back in 2017, when Trinity had Justin Powell, David Johnson, Jay Scrubb, etc. But overall, this game from start to finish was just, back and forth, teams taking their best chances and, throwing their best punches and trying to get ahead and stuff like that. And ultimately, Male was able to come out on top. Louisville commit Kaleb Glenn had 38 points in, arguably the biggest stage in the region. What most people have called, the eventual state champion. Now, obviously, there are some quality opponents left in the field of 16, including Kentucky's commit Reed Shepherd, Covington Catholic, who is a very solid team. There's a handful of very, very good teams. So I don't want to disrespect any of those teams because the journey still is a tough one for the male Bulldogs. But overall, on Monday evening, what we saw from Kaleb, I think, could be a good sign for the future because, number one, and this has been something all season long that for those who really haven't seen him play, he's around 6'7", plays a little bit like a Montrezl Harrell / Julius Randle. He actually said in an interview with the StatOfLouisville.com's writer Alan Thomas, good friend of the show, that he models this game after a couple different players like Giannis, Antetokounmpo, Julius Randle, etc. He kind of fits the athletic small ball 5 type role for a team, although he projects a little bit more as a wing. I know that he's improving his ball handling. One thing that was put on full display on Monday evening was the growth that we've seen from him in the past 3 years in his perimeter shooting. Now that is able to unlock the next stage of his game. In the final minutes of regulation, he hit back-to-back threes that put Male seemingly up. I think they were up 2 points ultimately at the end of it before Michi White got the steal and the layup. But his willingness to take those shots in crunch time with Maker Barr from Ballard, who's about 6'10", with him pretty much right in his face. I mean, that's a very clutch shot, or very clutch shots to hit, but also to even attempt. And that just kind of epitomizes the growth that we've seen from him throughout not only the past couple of years, but in fact, just the past couple months. I feel like, now, for those who aren't aware, I do announce for Mail. So I'm there at all of their home games, and I get to see up hand, him put on a full clinic of, scoring around the basket and just overall strength. And it was put to the test against Maker Bar, and Kaleb Glenn got his way in the paint. That spin move is deadly, around the basket. His ability to defend, I think that he was doing a very good job of protecting the rim. He kind of reminds me like I don't want to say he's LeBron in any way. But watching Kaleb, get chased down dunks and chased down blocks and time blocks perfectly, like, reminds me of watching LeBron, because anywhere inside the half court with a player taking it to the basket, you have to worry about Kaleb, meeting the ball at, its peak and blocking it. And that's something that I feel like he does very well, is timing opposing player shots. And he does a very good job of, just overall contesting shots, especially with his size at 6'7". Obviously, he won't be a center at the next level unless he were to add a couple of inches to his height. But ultimately, I don't necessarily think that he is a true wing either. I think he kind of fits in the mold of a small ball 5, kind of 4 hybrid, and in an era of positionless basketball, you don't have to fit him into a box of what you expect from him. I think that he does a lot of things extremely well. He's a very, very good around the rim, very efficient, very effective, hard to guard. We saw it against Ballard when he got the ball in the paint. He's been able to play off double teams well. He shows the ultimate, I guess you could say, the ultimate willingness to pass out of the paint, which is also a valuable trait to have, and not being a black hole on offense, but instead being cohesive in terms of the offensive flow. Just an overall great game, and seeing the progression in his perimeter shooting, in his ball handling, that is where Kaleb is to take the next step in his development, and I think that ultimately he is going to get there. I'm very excited to see him grow throughout the next year. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think that he is the best player in the state. Now, another player that played in that game on Monday night that might not get a lot of, or might not get as much hype as Kaleb does, considering that Mel won, is Ballard junior guard Gabe Sis, the 2023 shooting guard. Scored 30 points against Mel. He's about 6'5", can score anywhere inside the half court, hit a couple big threes. Very, very solid in taking the ball to the rim and utilizing mismatches, and also a very shifty guard that can create his own shots. So I think, personally, he's a very underrated prospect. When I've watched him play throughout the years, I really don't see the justification behind a low ranking. I ultimately think he's going to end up as a high, a high top 100 guy. Ultimately, a 4-star prospect that, depending on who the next headman's basketball coach is for Louisville, could end up, putting the full court press on Sisk. I think that Sisk is ultimately going to rise into being a fringe, Power 5 level guy. I think he has a lot of potential as a true, microwave scorer, but also as a defender as well. And with his size, I think he really matches what college coaches are looking for, size-wise, in a hybrid, combo guard. So ultimately, I think he's going to get into that conversation, of whether or not Louisville should be interested or not. I'm not sure that he ever rises to the rankings of which Kaleb Glenn and George Washington III are at the moment. But I do think he is going to be a top 100 guy, and he's a player that has shown that he's still growing in terms of his game and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, he should be a player that Louisville should take a hard look at. So we'll continue to talk about how Mel does. Also on that Mel team, 4-star defensive line signee Selah Brown, who hit some clutch free throws at the end of regulation. I don't know if it was the end. I think it was at the end of one of the overtime periods. it all kind of mixes together. But two very clutch free throws there. So, shout out to Tim Hayworth over at Mail, John Kelsey, Kaleb Glenn, Selah Brown, etc. It was definitely a game for the ages. I want to take this time now to discuss the upcoming matchup between the Louisville Cardinals and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and I'll tell you about why this is ultimately as favorable as it gets for the Louisville Cardinals in the ACC Tournament. We will talk about that in just a second after we talk about our friends at Prize Picks. Look, anyone that takes takes Loyola of Chicago right now, and now your brackets are busted. Mine's not going to be looking too good if I pick against them, because I think that Loyola is a team, although they've kind of struggled here in the latter half of the conference slate. I do think that they are primed to be a bracket buster once again. Or I should say anyone who doesn't take them should be looking to possibly get their bracket busted. But look, StatHero is the leader in March Madness, contests and stuff like that, pick'ems, player props, etc. NCAA single game pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups that you can comb through to take on head-to-head. It's the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix, and this is what daily fantasy was simply meant to be. So, do yourself a favor. You can sign up for free right now at stathero.com/lockedon for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon for a 100% match. stathero.com/lockedon. You can also use the promo code LOCKEDON to get that promo, or to get that that 100% deposit match. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Bracket Breakdown March 14th right here on the Locked On Louisville podcast feed and YouTube channel. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling give you in-depth breakdowns on every matchup. Transitioning over into the men's basketball side of things, where they will take on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets tonight in the first round of the ACC Tournament, 7 o'clock Eastern time, in the New York Life ACC Tournament in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. The Cardinals, by ESPN's Basketball Power Index, are a 58.5% favorite, have a 58.5% chance to win this game. Both teams come into this matchup losers of 4 of the last 5 contests. Georgia Tech has the most recent win coming in the season finale in an overtime victory over Boston College. They've lost to Clemson, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. The Cardinals, on the other hand, lost to Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, North Carolina, and Clemson. They beat Clemson but lost to the other 4. The Cardinals, really one of the only ACC wins of the season, came early on in January against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. It was a close one down in Atlanta, 67-64. Ultimately, the Cardinals battled past a high turnover night to where they shot, 48% from the field, only 26% from behind the arc, where Georgia Tech was 41% from the field, 37.5% from behind the arc. They almost nearly doubled the Yellow Jackets in free throws. Malik Williams led the way with 20 points. Michael DeVoe had 23 for Georgia Tech. So, both teams coming into this game, not necessarily going in the right direction in terms of where, the teams are headed. This is kind of one of those to where you're previewing a game to where ultimately in the next round you would assume that whoever wins is going to lose to Virginia. When you put both teams side by side, they are very, very, very close in statistical measures. Both teams shoot between 67 and 69. They score 67 to 69 points per game. They are allowing 70.3 points per game for Georgia Tech, 70.6 for Louisville. Field goal percentage, 42 for Louisville, 44 for Georgia Tech. Rebounding, 36 for Louisville, 34 for Tech. Assists, 12 for Louisville, 14 for Tech. and blocks within 0.2 of a block per game. So, I mean, they're very, very close in terms of statistical measures. The keys to the game for Louisville, and like I said, I think that this is ultimately one of the more winnable games that the Cardinals could have had outside of maybe Boston College, because I think that Georgia Tech is a pretty decent matchup for Louisville. However, you still have to be able to defend the 3-point line. I think that that's the number one key in this one is perimeter defense, because the top three scorers for Georgia Tech, Michael DeVoe, Jordan Usher, Kyle Sturdivant, all shoot over 30% from 3-point land, and even Tristan Maxwell shoots 40% behind him. So, and Dalton, I guess you could say Dalton Coleman as well. The 5 out of the 6 scorers, 5 out of the top 6 scorers for Louisville. For Georgia Tech, all shoot over 30% from the 3-point line. So ultimately, this is going to be a game in which Louisville is going to have to defend. I can't speak today. I am, mixing my words pretty much constantly, so I apologize. But perimeter defense is at the forefront here for Louisville. On the offensive end, really, I mean, I feel like I've been beating a drum for every single game this season, because I feel like the keys to the game offensively for Louisville have pretty much remained the same. They've done a better job of handling the ball well and not turning it over. But the key here for the Cardinals, I think that, it all kind of boils down to shot selection. I feel like this team is trying to be a team that excels in perimeter shooting, and the statistical averages don't necessarily suggest that that should be the identity of this Louisville basketball team. So I'd like to see Sidney Curry get going in this one for the Cardinals. I feel like, with however much success he has, that, could bode that much better for Louisville in this game. He's my player to watch here for the Cardinals. Coming off of a 28.14 rebound performance against the Virginia Cavaliers on Senior Day on Saturday. He has had a phenomenal last month and a half of the season. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays. Georgia Tech-wise, the player to watch for them, I'm going to go with Jordan Usher, 14.6 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, second on the team in points, first on the team in rebounds, shooting the ball 33% from the field. I felt like he was a player in the first half of that first matchup to where I think the Cardinals struggled to guard with him taking it to the rack, but also shooting the ball as well. I'm interested to see who Mike Pegues puts on him to defend. Really, it's a 1-2 punch with DeVoe and Jordan Usher. You have to be able to guard both of them from everywhere inside the half court. I'm going to go with Usher as the key player to watch here for Georgia Tech, but don't take that as any slight to Michael DeVoe, because he did lead the game with 23 points against the Cardinals in the first time around. In terms of a prediction, I'm going to go with Georgia Tech here. I'm going to go with a very, very close victory, like 3-point victory. I just feel like even though both teams have lost 4 of the last 5, I think that Georgia Tech has been more competitive in those games than Louisville has. I just overall think that even though it's one of the easier matchups when it comes down to, styles and stuff like that, Georgia Tech is one of those teams that can really light it up from deep. As I mentioned, 5 out of the top 6 scorers all shoot over 30% from behind the arc. One of the main issues with the Cardinals this season defensively has been perimeter defense. So if Georgia Tech shoots the ball well from deep, it could be a long night for Louisville. I'm going to go with the Yellow Jackets, probably 67-64 in this matchup. Actually, I think that was the first matchup. I can't do that. I'm going to go. Let's go 69-66. But it wouldn't surprise me if Louisville won this matchup either. So it's just kind of one of those pick'em games, even though Louisville is favored to win by ESPN's Basketball Power Index. The last segment of the show is going to be dedicated to answering the question why or what needs to happen for the Louisville women's basketball team to remain on the 1 seed line for the NCAA tournament. I'm going to tell you why it is completely out of their hands at this point. We'll talk about that here in just a second after we talk about a couple of our friends. First, at the title sponsor of the show, RunYourPool. March Madness is literally only like a week and a half away. That means you need to start thinking about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Along with the standard brackets, RunYourPool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And when you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. Also want to take this time to talk about our friends at BetOnline. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops, from all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fire coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs, and it remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. The Louisville women's basketball team had a tough go in the ACC tournament, losing in the quarterfinal round to the Miami Hurricanes, in which the Hurricanes went on a 17-0 run to end the game. The fourth quarter debacle has people wondering whether or not the team is still on the one line and what needs to happen over the next week to ensure that when the selection committee comes around, that the Cardinals are still a top seed in a certain region. I will go ahead and say that pretty much set in stone, South Carolina, Stanford, NC State are pretty much confirmed to be one seed. So there's only one spot left. Those in contention, obviously Louisville at this time, Baylor, who is actually ahead of the Cardinals in the AP rankings. Baylor is there. UConn is also there. And I think a couple teams are on the outside looking in. You have Texas at the 7 seed line, and also Iowa, who won the Big Ten tournament against Indiana last Sunday. They're also maybe in contention. I just don't think that Texas and Iowa are in true contention for this. I think it's really a competition between Baylor and Louisville and possibly UConn. UConn won the Big East tournament. They're 24-5. They got Paige Beckers back, and it's UConn. So sometimes if it comes down between committee, I don't want to make things political or anything like that. But when it comes to catering to UConn, I feel like the NCAA he does a great job of doing that in terms of putting UConn in favorable situations. So simply put, I think that for now, the Cardinals are on that 1 seed line. ESPN women's basketball bracketologist Charlie Cream has been consistent in keeping Louisville as a top seed. In his most recent bracketology update, which came out this morning, he has the Cardinals as a, he still has them as a 1 seed, the last 1 seed, with Baylor being the 2 seed. The Bears are ahead of the Cardinals in the AP poll. They're 25-5. They have a chance to go out and win the Big 12 tournament. They are the favorite to do so. When you look at their losses this season, they've lost to Maryland, Michigan, Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma twice. Their wins this season, however, just kind of scrolling down through what Baylor has done this season, they've beaten Iowa State twice. That's a top 10 team. They've beaten Texas twice, which is also, a top 10 team. But pretty much that's it. Between 2 wins at Iowa State and Texas, I feel like Louisville has the better overall, just the better overall resume. They do have 4 losses on the season: 1 to Arizona, 1 to NC State, 1 to North Carolina, 1 to Miami. They have 2 wins against Notre Dame. They have a win against Virginia Tech, over Duke, over one over Georgia Tech, Kentucky, UConn, Michigan, so on and so forth. So I think the overall resume, although the wins for Baylor might be more impressive because they have 4 over 2 top 10 teams. Louisville, I think, in the grand scheme of the season, has just slightly better of a resume. Now, that could change if the Baylor Bears win the Big 12 tournament, in that case, I think it gets really, really interesting, and ultimately, I think Baylor jumps the Cardinals if they win the Big 12 tournament. But the question now becomes, if it's kind of determined that Louisville and Baylor are on like the 4 and 5 seed rank, with UConn close at 6. Number one, how much does Baylor need to do to ensure that UConn does not jump them? What happens if Texas wins the Big 12 tournament? Do they become the number one overall 2 seed? Do they, it really just depends. So if Baylor wins the Big 12, it's one of those to where, okay, Louisville was going to play Baylor anyway, so does it really matter if they get the 1 seed? Well, you truly never know, because if Baylor loses, UConn's right there. They won the Big East tournament. Paige Beckers is back. It depends on who wins the Big 12 tournament. If it's Iowa State, if it is, Texas, does the Big 12 tournament championship put them over Baylor despite losing both matchups against them? Those are questions that need to be asked. For the moment, I think that Louisville remains the number 1 seed. The best thing that could happen for them would be Baylor not winning the Big 12 tournament. So, there actually won't be an episode tomorrow, unfortunately, due to some personal reasons. I apologize on that. We will be back in on Thursday, talking about the recap of what Louisville has done in the ACC tournament. If the season is over, we'll start the season reviews for each player. We will also talk about some football recruiting in the Thursday episode of the show. I want to give a couple quick shout-outs before we go. The Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. The most recent episode dropped on Sunday. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. As always, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Go Cardinals.